Good evening to the Square. Tonight's discussion will focus on how we can end period poverty in Rwanda. What do we mean when we say period poverty? This is basically a lack of access to sanitary products by women and girls, and which has very adverse effects. And in Rwanda, many girls miss up to 50 days of school work every year because of period poverty and stigma. We're here to discuss initiatives on the ground to make sanitary products accessible to girls and women. We're also here to discuss a couple of things as to whether these products should be tax exempt to enable easier access to girls and women. My name is Dana Mpisi. I am the host of The Square. I am joined today by our two lovely guests, their first time on The Square. And I'll start with the young lady on my left. Isabella Akaliza is the founder of Free the Period. Welcome to The Square.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. And on my right, we have Julian Ingabire Kaiwanda, who, amongst many things, today you're here in your role as a development specialist. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
The Square is also made up of its resident panelists. I'll start with Charles Saba. Always a pleasure to have you on the Square.
How are you, Diana?
Good.
Must apologize to our viewers that I'm not wearing Made in Rwanda today. It feels very uneasy. Yes.
And I didn't get the memo.
But your earrings are made in Rwanda.
Oh, yes.
And my shoes.
Okay.
So I'm not entirely.
You should get your shoes on the table.
Yes, so we should have a
We're
dancing
also
one. Yes.
joined, as always, on the Square, Brenda Namata, a resident panelist. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Diana.
Like we always do on the Square, we're going to have a quick recap, midweek recap of highlights that have happened this week. We'll keep it short and sweet. Charlie, I'll start with you.
I'm not exactly happy that we have too many public holidays. And especially,
in the private sector.
yes. I don't know how we're going to increase our productivity, increase our growth when we are working for very few days compared to how many we should be working for in a year.
I have a feeling there are a lot of viewers who are just really upset with your comment right now, but I get you. People, especially people working in government, who look forward to these holidays. But it's true, there's a productivity level that is cut short. Brenna?
The FT piece. Yes, Financial Times. And this is because on two levels. One, not everybody gets covered by the FT. It's actually very difficult to get coverage by the FT. So to get covered by the FT means something. You're important. So as much as it's such a problematic piece, we appreciate that Rwanda is at that level where it's actually, covered by the FT.
I like that angle.
Secondly, I think we need to revisit, and this is something that I've been discussing with my peers, in terms of media credibility. Now, the FT, of course, being the FT, it's big, it's a brand. When it publishes something, as usual, it will, get the attention of everybody. Now, but what we've seen from the past, and I'll make reference to a piece before, an investigative, there was a series of investigation done by a German magazine, also big and influential, called the Spiegel. Years later, we came to find out that actually this correspondent was cooking, information, coming up with non-existent sources. So as much as you want to look at the FT and it's the brand, it's credible, from the media perspective, I think there is room to actually look at the correspondent's credibility and also track record. It should be questionable. Thirdly, I don't think that piece is objective. I don't think so. And I think it's, in a way, in my view, it makes me wonder why a reputable institution like FT would try to do that. And why do I say this? Because as journalists, you try to be objective, you try not to be biased. But if you're trying to make a point, you've done an investigation, and the only prominent voices, in your piece are people who sort of push a certain narrative, then I think we begin to question whether you're actually being the investigative journalist that you want to be, or you have an agenda that you're trying to push?
I think this is definitely food for thought, maybe a show on its own, because I know, Charlie, you have views on this particular article as well, and Western media in general. But we're here today to discuss period poverty. And thank you once again for joining us, Isabella and Julian. And my first question, and I would like the rest of my resident panelists to weigh in, is to do with the impacts of period poverty on girls and women. And menstrual health is considered a taboo subject, as we all know, in general. And according to Sustainable Health Enterprises, She and the She28 campaign, which I know you worked with a couple of years back, states that 18% of girls and women in Rwanda miss out on school and work in 2018 because they could not afford to buy menstrual pads. Apparently, these absences are potential GDP loss of $215 per woman every year, totaling to around 115 million annually. In Rwanda, She is a local NGO based in Rwanda and has also presence in other African countries. So my question to you is, and I'll start with you, Isabella, is we are known for, you know, really promoting women, promoting girls' rights in this country. We are seen as a beacon of gender equality in that regard. Why do you think we're not making enough noise about this, and what do you think needs to be done?
Firstly, I'll thank you for having me, and also for creating a space like this where we can have discussions like this. I think that we're not talking about this because of the taboo that is around periods. However, I do know that the Ministry of Education has created certain programs that are aimed towards alleviating period poverty. I do think that we could be speaking about it more and creating more awareness. And it would have to start with changing how we talk about periods, changing the use of euphemisms like, what could I say, anti-flow or time of the month, and just being comfortable with using the word period. And the more we talk about it, the more awareness we'll be able to have.
Julian, why aren't we making enough noise? Or do you think we're making the right amount of noise?
To be honest, I think as advocates, we can't ignore the fact that change doesn't happen over time. We have to be patient, but we have to actually create a very strategic communication platform, like she says. I think, one, we need to be able to make sure that people do understand that menstrual health is not just a sanitation issue. It's also a human rights issue. We're talking about achieving SDGs, I think it's SDG 6, where we're talking about eco-sanitation and hygiene practices and special attention to women, events like menstrual health. So if you're going to achieve that, then we need to start talking about it. Because for the longest time, the worst sector has ignored this menstrual health issue. The education sector has ignored it because it does affect girls' education. So I think the fact that it's now being given a platform and a space where we can actually talk about periods and menstrual health issues, I think it's a good step that we're starting with, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Period poverty is not just accessibility to products such as sanitary pads. It's also an issue of, yes, there's access to sanitary pads, but there's also an issue of menstrual health education. You know, what knowledge do we have about this topic so that we're able to communicate about it? How do we dispose of products? How do we provide access to spaces where girls can change comfortably? What kind of communication are we giving to the girls when they're in their menses? So all that it leads to the whole issue of period poverty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brenna, do you have what is your take on this? I know you've been very vocal on the square about sanitary pads, sanitary products for girls and women in Rwanda.
Yeah, I feel that it's one of those things, again, about women that people take for granted. Most recently, we had an exemption on alcohol. Local.
I remember you mentioning this on the square. Yes.
And I was just wondering, people who drink alcohol will pay whatever amount to drink it. So in terms of prioritizing, yes, we need the money, we need to boost our manufacturing, that's understood. Mm-hmm. But in terms of priorities, these girls don't have a choice. There's no choice. It's natural. It's as natural as going to the toilet. Everybody goes to the toilet. So issues that are as natural as that, I don't know why we even should be discussing that we need an exemption. It should be common sense, in my view.
In your view. Charles, do you want to weigh in on this?
First of all, I think for the sake of the viewers, they need to know that I did not want to come to this show. I had a very long argument with Diana about this, and I didn't believe I would add any value towards period poverty or any conversation to do with periods. But that said, I think Julian has tickled my mind on some things that are very, very important that we take for granted. I'm in the real estate world, and I'll just pick out one example of how we design and our buildings, especially buildings that are accessed by many people, whether they're office blocks or shopping malls or churches, or buildings that are accessed by many people. And and you ask yourself, how often does an architect think about disposal of pads? Same conversation we can have around baby changing rooms. I sat down in one design brief with a developer, and it's like, that is wasted space. Why should we think about where a mother is going to change a baby? And you can even take it a notch higher and say, some of us who have young daughters, you know how difficult it can be to take a daughter to ease herself. So sometimes you have to wait and look for a familiar, friendly person near the ladies and say, please do me a favor, or you wait when the place is not too busy. So I think there's a lot of thought process that needs to be changed, especially in our planning, because we are not doing our sisters any favor by not making the right provisions.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'd like to turn the conversation to your work. You are the founder of Free the Period. I know you're an advocate on menstrual health management since your early days with Sustainable Health Enterprises, SHE. If you could, in particular, tell us more about your work, dating back to SHE, and the access you're providing of creating local fiber-made sanitary towels using banana fibers. How is this initiative? How did it start, and where is it right now?
So before I talk about the products, again, I think for the sake of the viewers, it's very important that we do understand that we tend to think that accessibility to products, it's just like the way we talk about girls accessing education. Yes, people do enroll in the classroom or in the school, but do they stay in the school? What are the challenges that they're facing along the way? Because you'll enroll 1,000 students today, and tomorrow you have 10 graduating. So it's the same as products. We have a lot of products on the market. Some of them, we could call them affordable. But a lot of other challenges, coupled with accessibility, tend to hinder girls to access all these products. If you walk around schools in the rural areas, but even just in Kigali, like Charlie was talking about, the design of the buildings that we do have, you don't easily dispose of products. It's recently that we started having separate toilets for women and men. Some buildings still don't have them. Schools obviously have, there's something called safe spaces these days in the schools, but trust me, if you go to those safe spaces, all you find is a bed, and there's nothing. The teachers are still having stigma around providing sanitary pads for those girls. The girls still fear to go for the services, even if they're available. Some teachers today are still telling girls, do not come to school until you're done with your menstrual period. Wow. So there's a whole challenge that surrounds just accessibility. And therefore, this issue has to be approached in a holistic manner. We can't just talk about sanitary pads without talking about education for teachers, about education for parents, for boys and girls, for the men. So it is really something that we need to look at in a holistic manner, not just looking at sanitary, because I believe that even if we removed taxes, it's not just one solution. It's a couple of solutions that we need to be thinking about. So in terms of what we did in the past and what is still going on, is that one of the challenges that we faced was what information and what knowledge do people out there have that will help them to actually understand that they need pads. Because most people believed, why do I need pads? I can use a piece of cloth. Mind you, some people still don't even have pants to actually use. In Rwanda, it's a much better situation, but other countries don't even have, some girls don't have pads. So one of the challenges really that we faced was knowledge around do we know how to manage that period in terms of hygiene practices, in terms of the kind of products that we use, in terms of how do we feel about it when we are in public. You know, girls to train teachers to be able to first understand what we're talking about, and then later on we'll get to the production of the pads. So obviously, again, as we saw, the challenge is the cost of the pads. Most of the products are imported, but actually even the ones that are made locally are usually costly because the raw materials are imported as well. So this is where we also need to be thinking, what kind of tax do we actually need to be scrapped off? Because we could be talking about VAT when it's not probably the one. If raw materials are still expensive in terms of importation to make the products locally, then that's also still a challenge. So we need to figure out and say which exact taxes do we really advocate for policymakers to look at. So so we developed pads using local materials, banana fibers, good enough. We had done a lot of R&D, research and development around whether that raw material can actually come up with a product. And did come out, and right now there's a whole production process going on in Ngoma district, where pads are being distributed in about 30 schools in the eastern region.
The she pads,
the go pads.
Yes.
But the strategy again was, how do we make sure that they're low cost? Because at the end of the day, you still find people still can't afford, even if you put it at 100 francs for a packet of 10. There's people who still not afford. So one of the strategies we adopted was, how do we make sure that, because we're looking at the girls' education issue, how do they keep in school when they're menstruating? So we said, if girls can have a couple of pads, maybe not necessarily buy a whole packet, but can we make sure that they at least get access to some pads while they're in school? So trying to manage menses again is quite a challenging issue, because the parent will tell you, I can afford only 2 pads. Okay, so if you can afford 2 pads, that's fine. If the girl's in school, let her go with 2 pads. If she comes back at home, she can still use the other materials that they're using, even if they're still not hygiene, and then try now to maintain hygiene practices for those materials. So it's trying to figure out, how do you make sure that girls are in school? They're not dropping out just because of 3 to 4 days that they're in menstruation. So if there are 2 girls in the home, can they buy a packet and share it? You know, depending on their menstrual period. So it was a couple of juggling around, how do we just make sure that these girls don't feel that when they're menstruating, they actually have to be out of school. So the pads are being distributed, education and trainings are going on. Advocacy is still going on. I think you see how I'm always making noise about some of those things. But I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, especially within the policymakers, because the other challenge that we did face, which something that still annoys me up to today, is that we have women in parliament who know about these things, but they're the people who actually don't even know that this is actually a challenge. I remember the first time we carried out a campaign, which was the first of its kind in Rwanda in 2010. I think Charlie, I shared it with him at the time. It was flagged off by a male minister. But we had been to parliament several times, and the women in parliament were like, we cannot go in front of men and start talking about menstruation. So the taboo issue is really a huge one. It's one of those silences that we need to break. And that's why I don't usually agree when they say, we need to educate men more. Some men actually understand more than women. At the time, it was Minister Muligande, and he looked at us and said, what do these girls do? You know, he could not believe that that's actually a problem. But he flagged off a very huge campaign that made the Ministry of Education adopt the first budget of its kind in 2010 to start distributing sanitary pads. It was quite small, but it was something. You know, it was a step towards a real cause. So I think one of the biggest things that we need to be doing is really develop a communication strategy that works, that is evidence-based, and you know, talk to policymakers and have them understand that this is actually an issue. I don't understand why the Ministry of Health and Education could be silent on such an issue when they know that we're really trying to empower girls and make sure that girls actually go to school and excel and stay in school. So it's really one of those things that, yes, we do need more evidence for, but I think, like Bana was saying, it's not even something that we need to be discussing here. It's outright there. You know, people know it. People know that happens. So we really need a lot of, we really need to be making more noise than we're doing today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Isabella, if you could just share with us your journey as a young lady, founder of Free the Period. What is your project? What is it based on? What do you hope to achieve? And what is it doing at the moment?
So as part of the Rwandan youth, we're always asking ourselves, how can I help? What can I do? What role could I play in the rebuilding of our country? And for me, I found that menstruation is an issue that affects everyone. Whether you're actually a person who menstruates or you know someone who menstruates, it's something that everyone comes into contact with. And in regards to the taboo, I remember when I was in boarding school and my father was the one who was supposed to visit, and he opened the boot of the car and he was like, I didn't know what to buy, so I just bought you everything. And so it's also about like speaking to boys, making sure that when we're having conversations about menstruation that they're involved, so that we can end the stigma, create more awareness, and also speaking to women when we're making decisions about infrastructure. Do they have dustbins where they can dispose of their period products in a private way? Do they have pads in the bathroom so that if the period comes unexpectedly, they don't have to leave work, they don't have to leave school? So it's about speaking and including these minority groups when we're making big decisions. Yeah.
And Free the Period. First of all, why the name Free the Period? I mean, it's quite a curious name.
So we came up with the name because of the barriers that come with having a period and the barriers that that arise because of period poverty. So we were saying Free the Period. And so our campaign, our aims are to end stigma and also to challenge the effects and the causes of period poverty. Yeah.
And I know on your page there's a crowdfunding.
Yes.
Can you shed more light on that?
So on our page, we have a GoFundMe page. As we address policy issues, we also want to make sure that in the short term, we're doing something. So the GoFundMe page is to raise funds, and with those funds, we'd be able to buy period products and distribute them to schools.
Wow, that's interesting. And how long has it been in existence for?
So the GoFundMe page is new, but Free the Period has been on for about 3 months now.
Oh, so it's pretty new.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And do you have
How much have you
Have we raised?
Yeah.
Oh, we haven't raised yet. Much, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, very, very interesting. And yes, you mentioned the government's policy, the Ichumba Chumukoga, and what more do you think can be done regarding government programs?
And probably before Julian comes in on that, I'll be keen to know how the industry, the factory or the production in Goma is doing, and if how much can you produce? You said it's most of the industries, most of the schools in the Eastern Province are accessing the product. Are you able to satisfy them? Do you have deals with the Ministry of Education or with the districts? And how is it doing as a business from a sustainability perspective?
So like Dan mentioned, I'm not actively with them now, but I'm more on the advisory side. But what I can say is that ensuring that you satisfy the market is definitely a huge challenge because the production capacity is really small. It started out as like a pilot project, and we developed a partnership in terms of vocational trainings. So we're trying to train women in the communities to actually leverage the products that they have to be able to provide sanitary pads. So what we did was train women on menstrual health education programs, on being able to assemble products and distribute. So the production capacity is definitely small because you understand that it's not a huge factory that has been set up. It's really a small production center where we're trying to look at obviously even the funding comes as a challenge. How are you able to scale it up to be able to distribute as many schools? But yes, we developed partnerships with the local governments and different schools. Some schools do have a small budget to provide sanitary pads, although it's still not enough, but it's more of crisis management for them when some girls, have like abrupt cases. And then they can be able to access pads. So the production capacity is still small, So that's why I think we keep advocating for more initiatives, for more programs and policies that are favorable to be able to help increase access to the products. Yeah.
If I could just come in, I'm insisting on men and the involvement of men as part of addressing the stigma. And the reason I'm insisting is because men, no matter, I think, the progress we've made in terms of gender equality, remain the key decision makers. So getting the men on board to really understand what women and girls go through and what they need, I think is crucial, especially even within the home setting. If a father or brother is scared about, period, or they don't even know what to buy, I think that's a problem. Charlie, you'll forgive me for for saying this, but I mean, Charlie with the lovely girls is still not comfortable talking about this. And we all know Charlie is for gender equality. So imagine some guy somewhere in a remote village. It's a taboo. In that home, the statement usually will be, please go and talk to your mama. Those are issues. Yes, yeah. But there are soft things that we could do if we break the stigma, especially change the mindsets among men. And I think part of the role, it's the women who have to take the lead and insist.
Absolutely.
My boyfriend has to buy the pads. My father has to buy the pads. My brother has to buy. I send them. I let them know that, during this time, I need you to make me a cup of green tea. Soft things like that within, because the more we don't talk about it, I think in my view, the more it becomes a big deal. But we have to involve men and have a strategy around men to sort of, in the long term, address stigma, because I don't think women can actually do it alone.
Absolutely, but also I really like what you say, Julian, and it takes me back with a conversation I had someone in terms of gender equality or the feminism agenda. You can't have policymakers, decision makers in parliament. Women. We're the biggest majority of parliament in the world. And these issues are not driven by those women to the grassroots level. I think that's a failure on our part. You would think with the representation we have in Parliament, these are issues we should not be discussing here on the square. Begging and beseeching, so to speak,
I think we should
people
challenge
to pay
them.
attention to these issues. You have girls who are dropping out of schools. You have women who are dropping out of the workforce. You have an impact on GDP. So these are real issues that affect society in the long run.
But the whole committee that is working on gender budgeting, something they call gender responsive budgeting. Something. So what are they putting in that budget that is being gender responsive? Those are the things that should be looked at this point. And the reason why I would actually like to challenge Bana is because, yes, we talk about men, changing mindsets of men, but we cannot ignore the fact that even women don't actually talk about it. So if we are not talking about it, how do you expect the man to talk about it? The mother in the home will say, no, don't, even when you're talking to her about menses, you're putting her on the side. It's not a conversation that you're having with your husband like this and saying, look, our daughter has reached that stage. Can we talk about this? So you're putting her behind the curtain and talking about it and buying her pads and keeping them somewhere. So if I am not doing that in the home, I don't expect my husband to do it.
Absolutely.
So it's something, that's why I keep insisting on a holistic approach. Yes, family should talk about it. Girls and boys should be trained. Teachers, both male and female, should be trained. So it should go simultaneous. And then, of course, our policymakers should be the champions because we have, that percentage that is sitting in parliament.
Yeah. Do you want to weigh in on this before we go to a Twitter feed?
And
Isabella?
Yes, I would. I think it starts with the small things. Even the word sanitary pads. The word sanitary, you would assume that it would mean that a period is unsanitary. And if you grow up knowing that your period is unsanitary and when you have it, you're unsanitary, then that's where the taboo starts. That you begin thinking that, okay, when I'm on my period, I'm dirty. And so if we change words like sanitary pads and just call it a period, then we start attacking the stigma and breaking it.
Straight from the language. I like that.
Yeah, that's true.
I like that.
Communication is key.
Exactly, communication is key. I would like us to go to our first tweet for today. And our first tweet is from a lady called Annette. And Annette states that a very nice and crucial topic, sanitary pads should be distributed freely to girls still in school, either at the beginning of term or kept in stores and distributed every month, because this is a necessity and most of the girls don't have means, hence interrupting studies. Absolutely. Before we go to our next tweet, this is basically what we've been saying on the square. Our next tweet is from a lady called Mary Minor. And Mary says that, awesome topic, I still wonder why condoms are provided for free and yet sex is a choice, while sanitary pads are sold expensively and yet menstruation is not a choice. Brenna, she echoes your tax exemption on alcoholic beverages locally made. So condoms and sanitary pads.
Very strong point, yeah.
Yeah, very strong point. I'd like us to go to, before we go to our other tweets on the next part of the conversation, which is to do with sanitary products, if they should be tax exempt. Like you said earlier on, sometimes tax exemption is not the answer. There are different types of taxes we need to look out for. My question to you, and I'll start with you because of Free the Period, and I saw the slogan on your page saying end the tax or something on pads and what have you. So we know that across Africa, the high cost of these products is also aggravated by high VAT costs. They're already expensive, and then the taxes on them are also high. And this is, I don't know if you've heard of the pink tax. Pink tax being products that are pink and naturally for women. So there's actually a study that says the pink tax, women's products are actually taxed higher than men's. I don't know if you knew that, Charles. From sanitary products to lotion to even toys for kids. The same car, if it's for a girl, it's, you know, this is in the US, it's probably $20 more. So these are issues that, yeah, it's very interesting. But my question is, do you think tax exemption on sanitary products is one way of ending period poverty?
I think it's a crucial step in a group of many steps towards ending period poverty. And the reason is, right now we pay 18% VAT on period products. And if you consider how many packets of pads you'd have to buy during a period, and that's every month for a whole year, that 18% really adds up. But more than that, it's also the issue of what does the VAT mean to us? Because medical products that we deem necessary, agricultural products that we deem necessary, we don't place a VAT on them. But we place a VAT on things that we would deem a luxury. So are we saying that period products are a luxury? And then if you ask women, they would probably say there is nothing luxurious about having a period. So period products are not a luxury, they're a necessity, they're a human right. So we should place them under tax-exempt products, like the other agricultural products, like the other medical products. Yeah.
I want to weigh in on that one and probably throw in a bit of a spanner in the works. Because I think the higher you are up the financial ladder, the more you'll be able to afford more luxurious products. And this is not restrictive to period products, also apply to the lotions that you use, the car that you drive, your choice of drinks, and so on and so forth. But back to Julian's example around the really basic necessity, pads that are made from banana fiber. And I'll tackle you again, Bana, on the exemption that was given to locally made alcohol, which I think was the right thing. Tax black label as much as you want. Tax always as much as you want.
But local.
But the one that's locally made in Goma by banana fibers, remove even the raw materials that make it. Should not attract import duty and everything else that comes with it. So all the other inputs that would make it expensive should really be exempted as much as possible. But the ones that are luxurious, I think I would still advocate for the pink tax.
Can I counter that?
Yes.
Briefly.
Yes. One, of course, I'm biased on this topic, so I can never agree with Charlie.
Yeah.
But I also feel like there's an opportunity to target the issue, use the issue and attract investment, you know, targeting, addressing the period, you know. So we may not necessarily go with exemptions on the products, but find a way of coming up with incentives that can attract investment that will eventually lower the costs and also make pads, you know, affordable and easily accessible. There are initiatives that could be done, for instance, with schools in rural areas, suppliers. Find a way of, you know, yeah, so exemptions are not really a silver bullet per se, yeah, but I think the team at RDB that works on incentives or that goes out there looking for investors, I think should prioritize the issue and get us, you know, investors that can help us address the issue in the meantime.
Julia?
Definitely, I think the approaches are many, and I definitely do agree with or, you know, let's look at, you know, the sanitary pads should not just have any tax period. That's it. You know, they should, I mean, somebody I think talked about a provision of free sanitary pads in schools or kept in stores. But the issue is, like she was saying, we need to first break the stigma. We need to first break the silence around it, because otherwise it becomes like the books that they provide in schools. You know, you give books to the schools, they keep them in the shelves, and they don't ever use them. So the sanitary pads, some schools actually do have sanitary pads. They'll buy a packet and keep it for emergency cases, but it will stay for 6 months without anybody ever having to access it, because they don't feel comfortable to, you know, to even talk to a female teacher about the issue. So it's really, if we look at it in the angle of dignity of a woman, being able to support them through, because if I'm comfortable during my menstrual health period, then I can do anything. I'll go about my work normally. Those who are going to the garden will go, you know, comfortable. So everybody will be productive. But if we are not providing the services and the products that they need during that period, then there's a whole production process that is being altered at some point. And so I think the approaches should be really looking at what are we doing in terms of policies. When we sit down to budget for the government, you know, when we sit down to budget for the education sector, what are we doing if we're not including this product? Why do we even think of, if we're supporting entrepreneurs in different sectors, what are we doing, like I was saying, what initiatives are we supporting in terms of providing these products? We have a lot of initiatives, a couple of them that are using, again, local materials to develop reusable products. And I think that's kind of going well in the region, not just in Rwanda. But again, the challenge becomes you're providing, and you're training them to make the reusable products, you're providing them to the students, but they're not able to wash them. They don't have soap, they don't have access to water, they can't, because of the stigma, they can't hang them under the sunlight to dry normally. So, you know, all these things become a challenge. So I think it's more of who is the person that is actually vocalizing this issue. You know, it's not just us guys on Twitter making noise and everything, but is there a policy person, somebody who actually is influential up there that is saying this is one of the issues that is affecting us? Most parents and most adults, we talk to young girls about menstruation when they're telling them, careful, don't get pregnant.
Yes.
That's the message that comes across when a girl starts menstruating. Yeah. So they're not teaching them how to manage the period. They're telling them, once you start menstruating, keep away from guys. Otherwise you get pregnant. So we need to change the language, like we're saying. You know, what kind of message are we giving them? Yeah.
Absolutely. I'd like us to go back to our tweets. Some really interesting tweets coming in. And we have a tweet, and this tweet is from Kaitesi. And Kaitesi says, it is heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time watching period poverty discussed in Rwanda on the square. It is a harsh reality and a social emergency. Failure to address it contravenes human rights and humanhood. It really goes, before we go back to our next tweet, it really goes to what we're saying. It's a necessity. It's the same thing as going to the bathroom and, you know, going to the bathroom comfortably. The next tweet is from Ryan. Ryan Yewell, I hope I pronounced his name properly, says, many men are practical. I think explaining to boys the parts of the female body, uterus, ovaries, a period starts to become very understanding. We are all here today because of the miracle of the uterus and how a woman needs to shed her lining when no pregnancy occurs. Yeah.
Interesting.
Interesting.
It came from a man.
From a guy.
At least I have some backup.
He saved you today. Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yes, exactly. So, so I just wanted to give some comparisons, still on the topic of the tax exemptions. In 2004, Kenya repealed its value-added tax on pads and tampons to lower the price consumers pay. Since 2011, the Kenyan government has been budgeting for around $3 million per year to distribute sanitary pads around schools, especially in low-income communities. In 2018 alone, they budgeted and bought 4.6 million worth of sanitary towels. I mean, if Kenya can do it, surely, what's
prioritizing?
Yeah, but then
prioritizing.
Next door, you also have the government of Tanzania. It's repealing its decision it made last year to remove VAT. I'm sure you heard about this from tax. This was done in June this year during a budget speech in June 2019. The Minister of Finance and Economic Planning in Tanzania told Parliament there's no benefit in tax-free tampons and sanitary pads because retailers did not reduce the cost. So even with tax exemption, there are all these issues we face. Would you like to weigh in more on this, Brenna?
Yeah, I think it goes back to saying that there's no silver bullet. As we've seen in Tanzania, they try to do it and then they realize, there are people taking advantage of it. So we must be aware that, of course, there will always be people who will abuse some of these exemptions. But, of course, if there's enforcement and we are very deliberate and we understand what we're doing, I think the chances of failing at it are less. And it's good that, we have them trying to do the research actually to back up some of us who are just emotional about these things.
Very emotional about this. Our next tweet is from Broke CEO, a very interesting title, from this young man who says, men in decision-making ranks must be at the front of championing for zero tax policy for sanitary pads. It's high time our East African nations rose up to protecting the dignity of ladies. Thank you, Kenya, for adopting the policy of providing sanitary pads to schoolgirls. I really hope this conversation is jogging the minds of policymakers, especially our majority representation of women parliamentarians, Julian, like you said, and I really hope things will change. And in that note, what are some of your expectations in this country regarding this issue, before I come to Julian?
If I could just quickly speak on the tax policy. It goes beyond making pads affordable. There's also an element of discrimination, because if you try to name a male product that is bought exclusively by men, you literally cannot. It's impossible.
Really? What do you mean? Can you expound on that?
For example, is there a product that only men buy? Could you name one?
I was going to say a razor, but we buy the same razor. I was going to say Nivea for men. I sometimes use Nivea for women. Yeah, you're right. Have you ever thought about that, Charles?
No, Bella just brought it to my attention. It's never occurred to me.
That's true. Yes. There's no product singularly for men that men only buy.
But there is a product that only women buy. And then we create all these barriers to prevent them from being able to access it. So when you remove VAT, you remove that element of discrimination. It might not necessarily have the answer for period poverty, but we also have to think about this element.
That's very interesting. We came here to learn. Like Bernard, Charles, and I was prepared to learn from the both of you, from the experts. Julian, what are your expectations on this topic? What are your expectations on making sanitary products, sanitary menstrual health management and education? What's your vision for this country?
I think I'd like to see this looked at as, again, a human rights issue, an issue of dignity for women, And one of the things we even intend to ignore even during the conversation, we haven't talked about it, emergency situations.
Expand on that.
Yeah, so if we talk about displaced persons or people living in camps because of disasters, because of different wars that are going on around the world. So you have women in camps. If we take an example of our Mahama camp, where we have refugees, the number of women that are there, the number of young girls that are there that are in reproductive age, what do they do? You know, we're providing food for them. There's a level of services that they're getting, but I've been to Mahama myself. There are no latrines that are suitable for that kind of service. So basically, the disposal is an issue, the accessibility is an issue, they don't know what to do with that situation. And that, if you think deeply about it, think of a young girl that is going to use the latrine at night, which is outside the camp tent. You know, that is also a risk in terms of violence. You know, what if she's raped in that period? What if, you know, so it's a lot of issues that we need to talk about. So that's why I think it's more than just talking about, it's more than just a sanitation issue. And that's why both men and women need to come on top of their game and you know, really deal with this issue from an in-depth point of view of, you know, how do you make sure that girls are kept in school, how do you make sure that women are going on with their productive periods, how do you make sure that they are moving around with dignity. They are not, like she was saying, they are not feeling like they are dirty, you know, during that period. So I think it's something that we need to sit down when we are budgeting for the year. That should be an item that is really budgeted in terms of education, in terms of health. All these ministries actually should be, you know, incorporating it. So I think we should be looking at it from Parliament, Senate, guys. Those guys need to wake up and really, if they want evidence, there is evidence. You know, scrapping off tax, there is definitely evidence. Tanzania says, you know, they have taken advantage of the situation. But that's one of the solutions. It could be one of the steps that they take. So I think really we need to look at it from a policy point of view, where if we're empowering women, we cannot empower a woman when she has lost her dignity during that period. Yeah.
And losing her dignity, that period, on a monthly basis.
On a monthly basis.
I mean, it's, yeah.
All her reproductive life.
Brenda Charles, do you want to give your closing remarks before?
Well, I'll Bernard to go first.
We kept going back to the members of parliament. The current head, if I'm not mistaken, of the national budget at the Ministry of Finance is actually a lady.
Yes.
So,
yeah, I can tell you, you really, this is close to your heart.
yeah. So,
yes.
Let's try and really try to be real, about these things, because sometimes I feel the debate gets emotional and we just lose it. We know that there's an economic value to it. We can attract investment that can actually address the issue. And two, we know that if there's a deliberate effort to change mindset, it will eventually happen. But the beginning point is to actually acknowledge that this is an issue that has to be addressed.
Diana, can I just say one more thing, please? I think on top of adopting, suitable policies, I think we also need to adopt menstrual health management curriculums. You know, we need to have schoolgirls, at least age-going schoolgirls, be able to learn about how to manage their menses even before they actually start menstruating, because they learn about biology. But what are we doing in terms of reproductive health? Because these days, they actually start menstruating early.
I know.
At 9 years, they're already menstruating.
Exactly.
So we need to incorporate whatever trainings, whatever curriculums around menstrual health management into schools, so that they're already learning about it in schools. If their parents don't know about it at home, at least the student will learn it from school, and then they can get extra information from home. But at least we need to couple access to products with knowledge, access to knowledge.
I really like your issue of actually putting it into national curricula. And these are things we take for granted. I mean, we're a subset of a small population where these things don't affect us and we take them for granted. But the majority of women and girls, this is a monthly, for us it's just life as usual. For many it's a monthly nightmare that affects their studies, that affects their work. I mean, it's I'm glad that we have you guys on the show sharing your gems of wisdom on this particular topic. Charles,
Yeah.
last word is with you.
Thanks. Two things. One, I want to encourage, whether it's Bella or Julie, on this. And any other advocate who's out there. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Don't tire. So you have our backing, I'm sure, and also thank Diana for having had us on the square
Charles,
talk
we need
about
to
this.
make a financial pledge as the square.
to free the period.
Yes, we should.
I agree. The second thing is really around prioritization. To anyone who's out there, really, who bothers to listen, is that the statistics that are scary in terms of how it reduces productivity of the girl child especially. So I think someone needs to wake up and make this a top priority. I want to give probably not the best of examples, but I'll talk about when we said we wanted children, school-going children, especially in public schools, to have access to computers. Positivo got a huge boost.
Yep.
Why can't we do the same with sanitary products?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And our last tweet for the day, is from Ariane, who says, we need to make a countrywide assessment to evaluate the impact of absenteeism, and the results will be shared to the decision makers. Service clubs like Rotary can also be involved to address this issue. I mean, I really like the fact that just on our Twitter feed, forgetting other platforms, it's something that touches people. We've seen the tweets from men, from women on this issue, and we'll probably have a part 2 of it in the near future. Hopefully things will have changed. Hopefully policymakers will see some surprises. Hopefully Free the Period will get a significant amount of funding to enable you to, execute your project.
How do we access it?
There's a GoFundMe link on my Twitter page.
Okay.
And your page is?
It is _.
Free the Period _.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll be doing a lot of
Advocacy,
making noise yes, after the show on our individual social media accounts. I'd like to thank our viewers for watching. Please subscribe to our YouTube page for videos on the square, to catch up with videos. Subscribe and keep yourself up to date. I'd also like to thank our partners, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee, for enabling us to keep it local and keep made in Rwanda. I'd like to thank the guests, Isabella, Julian. I'd like to thank my panelists, Charlie and Brenna. Always a pleasure having you. And thank you for watching, and see you again next week. Have a good night.